story number 1 elevator shaft. I arrived at the state office building on Asylum Street at 9 o'clock in the morning. The assignment was routine. Annual fire safety inspection, floors 3 through 7. I had completed the same inspection at this location for 4 years running. The building was constructed in 1972, a 9-story structure with standard office layouts, state administrative departments, and the usual compliance requirements. Gerald Moss met me in the lobby. He was the building manager, mid-50s, wearing a gray polo shirt with the state seal. He signed me in and handed me a visitor badge. Before I headed upstairs, he mentioned that maintenance had reported flickering lights on the 4th floor for the past week. Nothing serious, he said. Probably a ballast issue. They were scheduling an electrician. I thanked him and began my inspection on the 3rd floor at 9:30. The work was straightforward. I checked fire extinguishers for proper placement, pressure gauges, and inspection tags. I verified alarm boxes were accessible and functional. I tested exit signage and confirmed emergency lighting. I opened supply closets and storage areas to ensure they were not blocking egress roads. Everything was compliant. I took photographs and made notes. By 10 o'clock, I was moving to the 4th floor. The 4th floor corridor appeared normal. Fluorescent ceiling panels, beige walls, numbered doors on both sides. The lights were functioning normally despite what Moss had mentioned. I began opening doors to inspect the spaces behind them. The first door I opened should have led to an administrative office. The window visible from the exterior corridor showed a typical workspace with desks and filing cabinets. Instead, when I opened the door, I was looking down a stairwell descending into darkness. The stairs were concrete, unfinished, lit by a single bulb mounted on the wall. I closed the door immediately. I opened the next door. Same result. A descending stairwell, different configuration but identical in function. I tried a 3rd door. Another stairwell. I stood in the corridor and looked at the exterior windows. From outside, the building showed normal office spaces on the 4th floor. The windows were clean. The rooms existed. I radioed Moss and requested building schematics for the 4th floor. He said he would bring them up. While I waited, I attempted 2 more doors. Both opened to stairwells. I did not descend them. Moss arrived with a folder containing the original blueprints. The 4th floor layout showed 8 office spaces, a break room, 2 restrooms, and a central corridor. Standard configuration. He seemed unconcerned about the flickering lights. I asked him to open one of the doors with me. He opened the nearest door. Behind it was an office space with 2 desks, computers, filing cabinets, and a window overlooking Asylum Street. The room was furnished and appeared occupied. There was a coffee mug on one of the desks. Moss looked at me and asked if there was a problem. I told him I had opened the same doors moments earlier and found stairwells. He did not respond immediately. Then he said that was not possible. The building was inspected regularly. He would have noticed that. I asked him to leave the floor. He seemed reluctant, but he complied. Once the elevator doors closed, I opened the nearest door again. Stairwell. Descending stairs, concrete single bulb, darkness below. I documented this with photographs. The images showed only normal office interiors. The camera recorded what Moss saw, not what I saw. I took additional photographs of the corridor, the door frames, the exit signs, all normal. I made notes in my inspection log using neutral language. I noted the electrical concern Moss had mentioned and recommended further evaluation. I descended one of the stairwells. I needed to understand the structure. I counted the steps as I went down. The stairwell was cold. The air felt different. Not stale, but absent. I counted 240 steps before I emerged into a corridor. The corridor was the 4th floor. I recognized the door I had entered from. The numbering on the doors was the same. The windows showed the same view of Asylum Street. I had descended 240 steps and returned to where I started. I completed the inspections of floors 5, 6, and 7 without incident. All systems were compliant. I returned to the lobby at 1:15 in the afternoon and signed out. Moss asked if I had found anything serious. I said the building was in good order. I recommended scheduling the 4th floor for structural reevaluation due to the electrical anomalies, and suggested having an engineer verify the floor plan against current conditions. I filed my official report 2 days later. The inspection passed. I included an internal memo recommending the 4th floor be scheduled for structural assessment, using electrical code language to flag the space without providing specific details about what I had observed. The memo was marked for the facilities director and the state engineer's office. 3 months later, I received a notice that the building had been rezoned for limited occupancy. The 4th floor was listed as closed for renovation. No scheduled completion date was provided. The notice was distributed to all state employees with offices in the building. They were relocated to other facilities. I have not been assigned to conduct the annual inspection at that location since. The assignment was transferred to another inspector. I was not given a reason for the reassignment. My file regarding the building contains only the standard compliance report and the recommendation for structural evaluation. The internal memo was not included in the official record. The case is closed. Story number 2, filtration system. I arrived at the Clearwater Municipal Treatment Facility at 11:30 in the morning for a routine quarterly compliance inspection. This was my 3rd visit in 18 months. The drive from the regional office took 2 hours through open country, and the facility itself sat about 4 miles from the nearest town, which was typical for rural water infrastructure in that part of Montana. Dennis Cowell met me at the gate. He was the site operator, a man in his early 50s who had been managing the facility for 6 years, according to the records I had reviewed before driving out. He seemed distracted. After the standard greeting, he mentioned that the chlorine readings had been acting strange since Tuesday. I noted this and asked him to walk me through the specifics during the inspection. The initial walkthrough took about 40 minutes. I checked the 4 clarifier tanks first. They showed identical sediment patterns despite being on staggered cleaning cycles. Each tank should have presented different levels of settled material based on when it was last serviced. This was a basic operational variance that should have been evident. I asked Cowell about the cleaning schedule. He confirmed the stagger was correct. I made a note. When I requested the digital logs for the past 72 hours, Cowell hesitated. He said the system had been recording data normally, but when I looked at the timestamps, they were reversed. The most recent entry was dated 3 days in the future, and the sequence ran backward into the past. I asked him to explain this. He said he had noticed it on Wednesday morning, but assumed it was a software glitch and had not reported it yet. I told him this needed to be documented. I proceeded to the basement pump room to manually verify flow rates and check for any physical issues that might account for the recording anomaly. The room was cool and well maintained. I noticed approximately 6 inches of standing water on the floor near the main intake valve. This was not normal. The water was room temperature when I placed my hand in it, but the ceiling above the water showed condensation as though the water were freezing. I checked the thermometer mounted on the wall. It read 68 degrees Fahrenheit. The condensation pattern did not match this reading. Standard protocol required me to read, tag the facility, and call for a regional supervisor. I attempted to use my radio from inside the building. It functioned, but the signal degraded when I tried to dial out. My cell phone showed full bars, but would not connect to any network when I was within the building. Once I stepped outside the pump room door, the signal returned. I made the call from the corridor outside. I reported an equipment failure and requested a supervisor visit within 48 hours. Cowell became increasingly insistent that I inspect the secondary filtration tanks alone. He said he was not permitted in that section anymore. I asked him why. He could not provide a clear answer. He said it was something he had decided, but he could not articulate the reason. I told him to remain in the main control room while I conducted the secondary inspection. The secondary tanks were located in an adjacent chamber. There were 3 of them, each approximately 12 feet long and 6 feet deep. The water in these tanks was circulating. I confirmed the pump direction by checking the intake and discharge ports. The water was moving against the direction of the pump flow. The circulation was steady and consistent, moving in the opposite direction from what the system should have produced. I collected a sample from the nearest tank using a sterile container. The water was clear. I sealed the container and held it at eye level. I then inverted the container. The water remained suspended inside it. It did not fall. It did not shift. I inverted it again. The same result. I set the container on the sampling bench and left it there. I returned to the control room and told Cowell that I was classifying the facility under maintenance embargo effective immediately. I instructed him to cease all operations and to maintain the current system state until external review could be conducted. I filed a nonspecific equipment failure report with the regional office and noted that the facility would require a third-party technical assessment before resumption of service. I knew this assessment would be delayed. The regional office had a backlog of similar reports. Delays of 6 to 8 weeks were standard. Cowell asked if the water supply would be cut off. I told him that temporary service would be rerouted from the county emergency supply. He nodded. He seemed to accept this. I did not collect the sample I had taken from the secondary tank. I left it on the bench. I did not photograph the standing water in the pump room or document the condensation pattern. I did not request that Cowell provide written explanation for his statement about the secondary section. I completed my inspection report with minimal detail and submitted it through standard channels. The facility was quietly decommissioned 5 weeks later under an administrative water rights dispute. The county had filed a claim regarding historical water allocation, and the dispute provided legal grounds for permanent closure without requiring explanation of the technical issues. The facility was sealed. The equipment was left in place. I was reassigned to desk audits for the remainder of that fiscal year. My supervisor did not discuss the Clearwater facility with me. No follow-up inspection was scheduled. The regional supervisor who responded to my call never filed a report in the system that I could access. The file was archived under restricted status. I have not returned to that location. Story number 3, HVAC Crawlspace. I arrived at the county administration building in Culpeper at 9:15 in the morning. The assignment was routine. The building manager had submitted a work order through standard channels, citing employee complaints of headaches and nausea concentrated on the third floor. I had performed similar assessments dozens of times. The protocol was straightforward: portable air quality meter, CO2 analyzer, thermal imaging if needed, and a walkthrough documentation. The building was constructed in 1980. 4. Brick exterior, 4 stories, standard municipal layout. The manager met me in the lobby. He was a man named Garrett, approximately 50, 5 years old, who had held the position for 8 years, according to the intake form. He seemed reluctant to discuss specifics. When I asked about the affected areas, he directed me to the third floor without elaboration. The third floor was largely administrative offices. I conducted readings in the main corridor, the break room, and 3 occupied offices. All measurements fell within acceptable ranges. Particulate levels were normal. CO2 concentrations were appropriate for a building of that size and occupancy. I documented everything in my field log. There was no apparent source for the reported symptoms. I asked Garrett if there were other areas I should assess. He hesitated. He mentioned that maintenance staff had expressed reluctance to enter the northeast storage room after hours. But he characterized this as superstition rather than a legitimate concern. I told him I would include it in my assessment. The storage room was accessed through a service corridor. It was a windowless space approximately 12 feet by 18 feet, lined with filing cabinets and cardboard boxes stacked against the walls. Standard municipal storage. I noted the lack of any HVAC outlet in the room, which was consistent with its function as a dead end storage area. I took baseline readings near the door and began moving toward the back wall. At approximately 3 feet from the back wall, my thermal meter registered a significant anomaly. The ambient temperature in the building was maintained at 72 degrees. In this localized zone, the reading dropped to 54 degrees. There was no ventilation source, no window, no external wall access. The temperature differential was consistent and measurable. I moved closer to document the readings more precisely. That was when I heard the voices. They were not coming from outside the room or from an adjacent space. They seemed to originate from within the wall itself. Multiple voices speaking simultaneously, overlapping, none of them producing intelligible words in any language I recognized. The sound was steady and continuous, not muffled or distant, but present and immediate. I stepped back. My portable air quality meter was in my hand. My thermal imager was in my kit. I had not activated any recording device. The meter itself had no audio function. When I reviewed the meter's data log later in my vehicle, there was a 7-minute audio file embedded in the device's memory. The file contained the voices I had heard, layered and continuous, speaking in what appeared to be multiple languages simultaneously, though none were identifiable to me. The file timestamp indicated it had been recorded during my 90-second presence in the room. I contacted the building manager and recommended immediate evacuation of the third floor pending further investigation. Garrett's response was immediate and firm. He told me that the county supervisor had specifically instructed him to resolve this matter quietly, without involving outside agencies or generating documentation that would require external review. He asked me to classify the issue as equipment malfunction and submit a standard all-clear report. I contacted my regional supervisor that afternoon. I described the temperature anomaly, the audio file, and the building manager's directive. My supervisor listened without interruption. When I finished, he instructed me to classify the incident as resolved due to faulty wiring in the building's electrical system. which had apparently caused interference with my meter's sensors. He told me to submit no further documentation and to consider the assignment complete. I asked if I should recommend an independent inspection. He said that would not be necessary. The third floor of the county administration building was closed for renovations the following week. I learned this through a routine email from the county facilities department sent to all contractors on file. The email did not specify the nature of the renovations. I attempted follow-up calls to the county office 2 weeks later to confirm the building's status. All calls were redirected to a disconnected number. My company reassigned me to commercial properties only, effective immediately, without explanation. My previous assignment rotation, which had included municipal and institutional buildings, was transferred to another technician. The audio file was removed from my company server by IT personnel. I was instructed that the file had been flagged as corrupted data and permanently deleted. I was required to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding equipment malfunction during the culpable assessment. The agreement specified that I could not discuss the incident with colleagues, clients, or external parties, and that any breach would result in termination and legal action. The incident was closed on October 18th. It was classified as equipment failure. No external agency was contacted. No follow-up assessment was scheduled. The building manager's concerns were noted as resolved. My reassignment stands. The file no longer exists in any accessible form. The matter is archived.